It rises from the mist like a dream that never learned how to wake up. In the middle of the St. Lawrence River, surrounded by cold currents and drifting fog, stands a palace with 120 rooms, soaring towers, marble halls, and gardens shaped like European fantasies. Tourists today call it romantic. They take photos, leave smiles, and sail away. But those stone walls remember something different. They remember heartbreak, Heart Island. A name too perfect to be real, too tragic to be forgotten. More than a century ago, a billionaire hotel tycoon George C. Boldt looked at this island and saw not a project, not an investment, but a promise. A promise to the only woman he had ever loved. A woman he believed deserved a castle, a kingdom, a fairy tale carved into rock and surrounded by water. For 4 years, hundreds of workers labored day and night. They built towers inspired by European romances. They carved archways, meant to echo with laughter. They engraved symbols of love into stone, believing they were building a monument to a marriage that would last forever. But then, one winter morning, a single phone call reached the island, and everything stopped. The workers dropped their tools. The foreman froze. A message was delivered to the construction site. Mrs. Louise Boldt has died. Stop all work immediately. No explanation, no farewell. No one ever returned to finish the palace. The grand home built for love became a tomb for a dream. Untouched, unfinished, unclaimed by the woman it was meant for. Today, when visitors walk through the empty halls, they sense it, the echo of a story that never found its ending. A castle built for a heartbeat that never got to feel one. This is not just the story of a building. It is the story of devotion, grief, and a love so powerful that even the stones still seem to mourn. Welcome to the island palace that was never meant for a ... And once you know the truth hidden inside these walls, you'll never look at Boldt Castle the same way again. George Charles Boldt did not come to America with a crown on his head. He arrived with nothing, no fortune, no legacy, not even a name any could pronounce correctly. He was just a German immigrant, boy with sharp eyes, quick hands, and an instinct for survival. In the crowded streets of Philadelphia, where soot clung to brick walls and the port, unity felt like a rumor. Young George learned something that would define the rest of his life. If the world doesn't give you a place, you build one. He worked wherever he could, washing dishes, carrying coal, scrubbing hotel floors so polished that he could see his own reflection kneeling back at him. But while others focused on the dirt or the exhaustion, Boldt watched the people who lived above it, the guests, the owners, the wealthy visitors who slid envelopes across marble counters. He studied how they walked, how they spoke, what they desired even before they said a word. George wasn't just learning hospitality, he was learning power. By his late 20s, he climbed from dishwasher to dining room manager to hotel visionary, one of the few who understood that luxury wasn't just a service, it was a performance. Every detail mattered. The sound of glasses clinking, the scent of fresh linens, the way the front doors opened like a promise. And then, everything changed the moment he met Louise. Cara. She wasn't royalty. She wasn't wealthy. But she was luminous, gentle, intelligent, with a quiet grace that made George feel, for the first time, that life could be more than ambition. Louise wasn't impressed by status. She was impressed by character, by kindness, by the determination burning behind George's calm eyes. He saw the man he was trying to become. With her, George felt something he had never felt before: enough. Together, they built more than a life, they built an empire. Louise encouraged George. When he dreamed too big, George protected Louise. When life grew harsh, their partnership was a fusion of passion and purpose. By the time he reached middle age, George Boldt had risen to become the most influential hotelier in America. He transformed the Bellevue Stratford into a palace of elegance, then shocked the world with the creation of the Waldorf Hotel, an establishment so luxurious it reshaped the definition of high society. Later, he united it with the Astoria, creating the legendary Waldorf Astoria, a monument of glamour and wealth that pulsed at the center of New York like a beating heart. Millionaires stayed under his chandeliers, politicians whispered secrets in his hallways. Kings and queens visited New York and asked for rooms under his name. And yet, through all of it, George remained the boy who once scrubbed hotel floors, grateful and determined, fueled not by greed, but by something softer. Every success was a gift for Louise, Eve, re-triumph, an offering. Every new empire he built for her. She was the anchor to his ambition, the calm to his storm, the one person who reminded him that love mattered more than marble, crystal, or gold, and in return, George tried to give her the world, but the world, no matter how vast, wasn't enough. So he set his eyes on something bigger than cities, wealth, or reputation, something eternal, a palace, not in New York, not in Europe, but on a lonely island in the St. Lawrence River, where love could be shaped into towers and carved into stone. A palace for Louise, a palace that would stand as proof of his devotion. Long after they were both gone, he believed he was building a monument to love. He didn't know he was building a monument to heartbreak. Louise was the calm in George Boldt's storm, the one person who softened his hunger for success. But love, when it grows too bright, often seeks somewhere to live, somewhere to rest outside the chaos of the world. And George, now a man who could buy almost anything, found himself searching for a place not to own, but to dedicate. That search would lead him to a small island shaped like a heart. The St. Lawrence River is not gentle. Its currents run cold even in summer, slicing between Canada and the United States with the sharp precision of a natural border, yet scattered across those restless waters is a breathtaking chain of over 1,800 islands, rocky, pine-covered, dreamlike. A place the world would later call the Thousand Islands, but at the turn of the 20th century, the islands were still half forgotten. Remote, wild, untouched by luxury. It was exactly the kind of place a man like George Boldt would see not for what it was, but for what it could become. He first sailed through the region on a quiet summer evening with Louise. The air was cool, the water glassy, and the islands dotted the horizon, like emerald jewels rising from white mist. Louise loved the peacefulness. She said it reminded her of European lakes, places where time felt slower, kinder. But George saw something more. He saw possibility. And then he saw the island. A small rise of land, no bigger than a private estate. Wild grass, a few lonely trees leaning toward the river. An irregular shape, and yet, from above, unmistakably, a heart island. Some say Louise was the one who noticed the shape first. Others say George saw it instantly. But everyone agrees on one thing. The moment they stepped onto the rocky shore, a decision had already been made. Within months, George purchased the island. Not because he needed it, not because he planned to expand his empire, but because she loved it. He wanted to transform this little patch of wilderness into a European-style romantic palace, a place where Louise could escape the noise of New York, where summers would be filled with music, gardens, and evenings watching the river turn silver under moonlight. And when George Boldt wanted something, entire worlds moved. Architects were summoned, engineers were transported by steamboat, shipments of limestone and marble filled the docks, steam cranes crawled across the island like iron insects, tearing away old rock and sculpting new foundations. Before long, Heart Island became a living construction site, a tiny kingdom rising from the water. More than 300 laborers lived on the island full-time, working day and night in rotating shifts. They built barracks, kitchen, and tool sheds. They carved pathways and drilled through bedrock. The sound of hammers cracked across the river each morning, echoing through the fog like distant thunder. Boldt didn't want a house. He wanted a fairy tale. He ordered a 6-story castle inspired by European chateau, with soaring towers, arched windows, and a grand dome that would glow like a pearl above the river. He envisioned elaborate gardens, modeled after Italian villas Louise had loved on their travels. A drawbridge, a children's playhouse, a powerhouse modeled like a miniature fortress, a secret underground passage, connecting buildings. Every detail was a love letter. Workers whispered among themselves that they had never seen a man build something so monumental, so quickly, with so much feeling, behind every instruction. But the most stunning thing was not the size, it was the intention. George announced that the castle would be finished by Valentine's Day. He planned to present it to Louise as the ultimate gift, not a hotel, not a business transaction, but a tangible symbol of the love that had carried him from poverty to empire. He wrote in one of his letters, "This house will be our refuge, a place where the world cannot reach us." To Louise, he described each room as it came to life. The ballroom that would echo with her laughter. The balcony where she could eat as the river wind tangled through her hair. The stained glass heart set into the floor of the main tower. A heart designed for the woman who carried his. The workers believed they were building a palace, but George knew the truth. They were building a promise. And yet, beneath all the optimism, all the construction, all the dreams carved into stone, fate had already begun tightening its grip. For 5 years, Hart Island transformed from wilderness into wonder. Every stone, every arch, every grand stairway was shaped for one woman. And George counted the days until he could place the key to the castle in her hands. But life has a way of striking hardest when a dream grows too close to reality. By 1904, construction on Hart's land had reached a breathtaking pace. The castle's walls rose high above the river, catching sunlight like polished bone. The great dome was nearly complete. Marble arrived daily, hauled upriver on barges, owning under the weight of imported stone. Inside, workers installed carved oak staircases, stained glass ceilings, and fireplaces taller than a man. Every corner of the island was alive, with movement, chisels chipping, cranes clanking, steam whistles echoing through the pines. It was the busiest year the Thousand Islands had ever seen. And then, without warning, everything stopped. It happened early one winter morning. Snow had fallen lightly overnight, muffling the noise of the river. Workers gathered in the powerhouse, warming their hands by the furnace, preparing for another long day. But the foreman arrived late, his face pale, his breath visible in the cold air. He carried a telegram, one sentence, a message that would end everything. "Mrs. Boldt is gravely ill. Stop work immediately." The men stared in confusion. Stop work. This project had never paused, not for storms, not for shortages, not for anything. Boldt had spared no cost, no effort, no delay. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Within hours, orders were repeated across every building. Put down your tools, drain the boilers, pack your equipment. The castle that had roared with life suddenly fell silent. That afternoon, word spread from worker to worker, whispers at first, then murmurs, then quiet dread. Louise Boldt was dying. The news traveled faster than the wind across the frozen river. The woman whose smile had inspired a palace. The woman for whom hundreds labored through blistering summers and brutal winters. The woman what our love had driven George to build a place meant to last forever. She was slipping away. Back in New York City, Louise lay in a hotel suite draped in gentle light, her breathing shallow, her pulse fading. Doctors moved quietly around her, exchange of luxury, brilliance, and power. But none of them could save the only person he built them for. Just past midnight, Louise's heart finally gave out. She was only 41. George didn't cry in front of the doctors. He didn't speak. He simply lowered his head, pressed her hand to his forehead, and whispered something no one else could. "Load here." By morning, the news reached Hart Island. The foreman gathered the men at the base of the castle's unfinished tower. Snow fell softly around them as he spoke. "Mrs. Boldt's pa said," he said. "Mr. Boldt asks that all work be stopped indefinitely, not paused, not delayed. Stopped forever." Some men removed their caps. Others bowed their heads. They weren't mourning a check. They were mourning the soul of the island, the reason the castle existed at all. They packed their tools. They boarded barges. They drifted back across the river, leaving behind walls that would never be finished, staircases that led nowhere, and towers that would never echo with the laughter they were built for. Hart Island became a ghost, and George Boldt, once a titan of beauty, once the unstoppable architect of an empire, returned to New York a quiet, broken man. He never set foot on the island again. Not once, not in anger, not in grief, not in remembrance, because Hart Island had become something unbearable. A palace carved for love, now haunted by loss. For 73 rooms, he had envisioned a future. For 73 rooms, he imagined some earth with Louise walking beside him. Now, every brick, every balcony, every shutter whispered the same unbearable truth. A castle built for a queen who would never see it. Hart Island froze in time. Either day Louise died. Snow swallowed the gardens. Rain filled unfinished stairwells. Windows cracked. Ceilings sagged. 4 decades. The once living dream collapsed slowly under its own sadness. Travelers, passing boats said the castle looked like it was mourning. Locals whispered that the island had absorbed George's grief, that the wind through its empty arches sounded like someone trying not to cry. And somewhere in New York, in a quiet room filled with memories he could not escape, George Boldt sat alone, the weight of silence pressing harder than any stone he ever laid. When the boats carried the workers away and their hammers faded into the cold distance, Hart Island became exactly what its name suggested. Place broken in half, but grief does not end with silence. Sometimes, silence is where it begins. For much of his life, George C. Boldt had been a man who outran everything: poverty, competition, exhaustion, doubt. He built faster than fear could catch him. He worked harder than fate could pull him down. He survived the brutal hospitality world of New York City, turning a failing hotel into the world-famous Waldorf Astoria. He became a symbol of elegance, confidence, and unstoppable ambition. But losing Louise broke something in him that no empire could repair. In New York, his staff noticed the change immediately. The man who once strode through marble hallways with the energy of a general now moved slowly, speaking softly, as if something inside him had caved in. His footsteps, once firm and precise, became hesitant, like he was walking through memories he couldn't bear to relive. He still wore the same tailored suits, still attended meetings, still signed papers. But the spark that made him George Boldt was gone, because the only person he most wanted to impress, to surprise, to build for, wasn't there to see it anymore. He isolated himself in a private suite at the Waldorf, the same hotel where he had once entertained presidents, inventors, and society's elite. But the vibrant gatherings were replaced with quiet dinners for the grandee-ning room felt too large, the halls too empty. Employees whispered that they sometimes heard him pacing his suite late at night. Others said he would sit alone in the palm garden for hours, starry, NG at nothing, while an untouched cup of coffee cooled beside him. People grieved in different ways. Some cried, some prayed, some drank. George built castles, but now even that solace has denied him. 4 years. Letters addressed to the Boldt estate, Hart Island arrived unopened. He never responded to inquiries, never considered resuming construction. He never visited to check on repairs, never walked the unfinished halls where Louise's laughter was supposed to echo. He had effectively abandoned the island. As if returning would mean reopening a wound he didn't know how to survive. Meanwhile, nature moved in. Vines crawled over, the stone-like fingers reclaiming what man had borrowed. Rainwater filled the grand staircase, dripping through cracks like tears. The great dome of the castle dulled under storms, its once glittering tiles fading into weary grey. Local fishermen who passed the island said the windows looked like eyes staring back at them, watchful, mournful, waiting for something that would never come. They called it the Castle of the Broken Heart. Decades passed, and George aged quickly. He withdrew from high society, avoided public appearances, and turned down invitations to speak at banquets. When he did attend, he appeared as a ghost of himself, polite, courteous, but distant, as though his body was present while his mind wandered the halls of a place he swore never to see again. Even his children noticed the shift. Before Louise's death, George had been a warm father, strict but affectionate, eager to share stories or walk with them through Central Park. Afterwards, he grew quieter, more protective, almost fearful of losing anyone else he loved. He stopped taking long trips. He refused to go near the river. He worked less each year, delegating responsibilities, while he spent more time alone. Friends tried to encourage him to start anew, to travel, to enjoy the wealth he had earned, to find comfort, tea in the company of others. But grief had carved an emptiness so deep that nothing could fill it. No amount of luxury can soothe the ache of losing someone who shaped your entire world. Heartbreak, George Le Arnid, is not a moment, it is a landscape, a place you wake up in every morning, no matter where you sleep. And Hart Island, unfinished, abandoned, silent, was the physical reminder of that landscape, a monument not to love fulfilled, but to love frozen at the very second it was shattered. In one of the few remaining personal notes he wrote during these years, George scrawled a single sentence across the bottom of a financial ledger: "What is a castle worth without the one it was built for?" He never remarried, never began another grand project, never tried to replace what he'd lost. Instead, he let time carry him slowly, quietly toward the same stillness that had taken Louise. In 1916, just 12 years after her death, George C. Boldt passed away in his sleep at the age of 63. He died far from Hart Island, yet the castle remained the truest reflection of his life. Ambition carved into stone, love layered into every wall, and grief left unfinished. But the story of Hart Island was not over. Sometimes dreams wait, sometimes the past whispers, and sometimes the things we abandon find their way back into the light. When George Boldt left this world, the castle he built for love remained unfinished, untouched, unreachable. But time does not stand still for our grief, and nature claims everything man abandons. After George Boldt's death in 1916, Hart Island entered a new kind of silence. Not the sudden, breathless silence of tragedy, but the slow, creeping silence that comes when the world forgets. No caretakers arrived to replace the workers who had left in 1904. No boats delivered fresh stone or lumber. No lights glowed in the window WS at night. The great halls that were meant to hold music and life now held only dust. For the first few years, curious locals ventured near the shore, rowing their small boats around the land to glimpse what remained of the grand project everyone had heard whispers about. They were stunned at what they saw. An entire castle, massive, majestic, but lifeless, a skeleton of beauty. Yet even they could not have predicted how quickly time would turn the masterpiece into ruins. Winter storms swept across the river, pushing sheets of ice against the unfinished foundations. Winds howl, D through open windows, pulling at curtains that had never been hung. Water seeped into cracks and froze, splitting stone with every season. By the 1920s, Hart Island looked less like a palace in waiting and more like a monument abandoned by its own creator. The gardens Louise had dreamed of became tangled thickets. Birds built nests in the rafters of the ballroom. Great copper pipes began to corrode. Tiles loosened and fell like broken promises, one by one, and no one stopped it. During Prohibition, rumors spread that smugglers used the island as a waypoint. Fishermen claimed Hay saw lanterns flickering in the windows at night, ghostly silhouettes moving through corridors that should have been empty. Some swore the castle was haunted. Others said they saw the figure of a woman in white standing on the tower balcony at dusk. But no one ever stayed long enough to find out. The 1930s came, and with them the Great Depression. Money was scarce, hope even scarce. Who could worry about an abandoned castle when families were struggling to eat? Hart Island disappeared from conversation, from memory, from relevance. Throughout the 1940s, scavengers drifted through the region, salvaging anything they could find in remote buildings: copper pipes, iron fixtures, old machinery. Some tried to approach the castle, but the waters were dangerous, and the locals warned them away. All you'll find there, one old boatman said, is sorrow. Storms continued to eat away at the palace. Lightning struck the powerhouse roof. A fire broke out in one of the secondary buildings. Rainwater carved pathways through marble floors that were meant to last centuries. Inside the main hall, puddles formed on the ornate stone. The grand staircase, once envisioned as the heart of the castle, buckled in places. The basement flooded every spring. Insects nested in the cracks of expensive imported stone that had never been sealed. Even the river itself conspired against the island. During harsh winters, ice floes slammed into the shoreline, gnawing at the foundations like teeth. By the mid-1950s, the once dazzling Hart Island had become a ruin. Visitors passing by in tour boats saw only an eerie silhouette rising from the mist, a crumbling reminder of a dream that never came true. Some days, the castle looked peaceful, like a sleepy giant covered in snow. Other days, it looked wounded, its empty windows staring out over the water like hollow eyes. And yet, through all the decay, through all the storms, through decades of abandonment, the castle still stood. It leaned, it cracked, it weathered storms that toppled stronger buildings. But it did not fall. There was something unexplainable about the way it refused to die, almost as if the island itself remembered what it had been built for. As if the stones, laid with devotion and longing, resisted the river's attempts to reclaim them, as if the love that created the castle lingered in its walls, refusing to vanish completely. Local children growing up along the river told stories about the Palace of Heartbreak and dared each other to explore the overgrown docks. Some swore they heard footsteps in the empty halls. Others claimed the air felt warmer near the grand staircase, as if someone had just walked through moments before. Nothing disturbed the castle more than time itself, slow, steady, unstoppable. Decade by decade, Hart Island drifted toward oblivion. A monument no one asked for, built by a man who no longer lived, for a woman who never saw it. And yet, fate was not finished with Hart Island. Because in the late 1950s, after more than half a century of silence, the castle caught the attention of someone who saw not just ruins, but the ghost of an extraordinary love story waiting to be revived. For half a century, Hart Island was a beautiful corpse. Not alive, not dead, simply suspended in time. But no ruin stays hidden forever. And sometimes, the world rediscovers what one man tried to forget. By 1956, Heart Island had become a legend whispered across the Thousand Islands. Tourists pointed from their boats, wondering why such a magnificent structure stood empty. Families told stories of a grieving billionaire, a doomed romance, and a castle abandoned the day love died. But no one truly knew the truth. No one had stepped inside in decades. That changed when the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority, a public agency responsible for maintaining the region, took interest in the island. Their initial concern was simple and practical. The castle had become dangerous. Stones fell unpredictably. Floors had collapsed. The gardens were a jungle of thorns. If someone tried to explore it, they could die. The authority purchased the island from the Boldt family, not to revive a love story, but to prevent a tragedy. Yet, when the inspectors stepped inside for the first time, something unexpected happened. In it, they were stunned. Even in ruin, the castle was breathtaking. Sunlight poured through shattered stained glass, scattering fractured rainbows across the dusty floor. Marble fireplaces towered over empty rooms like frozen giants. Carved wooden beams blackened by time still showed intricate patterns meant to impress guests who never arrived. The inspectors walked in silence, their boots crunching broken tile. There was a strange feeling inside the castle, not just sadness, but potential. As if the place was waiting for someone to care again. One of the authority members whispered, "Imagine what this could be." And that thought changed everything. What began as a safety inspection soon grew into a restoration mission. Not to finish the castle as George had planned. No one could recreate his exact dream, but to preserve what remained, to protect the pieces of history still alive beneath the rubble. Local workers, carpenters, stonemasons, and historians were brought in. They walked the grounds with clipboards, sketches, and careful steps. Every cracked arch, every broken window, every sagging beam was catalogued. The restoration team faced a monumental challenge. Decades of neglect had left their scars. Water damage weakened foundations. Entire staircases had collapsed. The roof sagged dangerously. Plants grew through window frames. Birds nested in bedrooms meant for summer guests. Some rooms were so unstable no one dared enter. But something remarkable happened. When locals heard the castle would be restored, not destroyed, they volunteered. Retirees donated their time. Artists offered to repair frescoes. Descendants of the original workers arrived, carrying old photographs and stories passed down from their grandparents. Heart Island was no longer just a ruin. It had become a community mission. Every summer, crews removed debris, replaced beams, repaired stone, restored gardens, and installed new pathways. They stabilized the towers, rebuilt the powerhouse roof, and protected the stained glass windows that had somehow survived a century of storms. But the most emotional moment of the restoration came when the team discovered something hidden deep inside a damaged wall. A carved stone heart, small, delicate, chiseled by hand. No one knew who had made it. Some believed it was an artisan expressing devotion to the project. Others believed George himself had placed it there secretly. But everyone agreed who it was meant for. Louise. Workers paused, standing around the stone in silence. For a moment, it felt as if the past had reached out through the rubble. A faint memory of the love that once built an empire on an island. Word spread quickly. Tourists, hearing the story, flocked to see the restoration efforts. Boats lined the water. Hotels filled. The tale of the castle and the heartbreak behind it captured imaginations across the country. The Bridge Authority decided something bold. Heart Island would be opened to the public, not as a finished palace, but as a preserved tragedy. A monument to love, loss, and the resilience of a dream. The first day the island reopened, crowds poured onto the docks. They wandered through the restored rooms, marveling at the blend of ruin and beauty. Some stood in silence inside the grand hall, imagining how it might have looked if Louise had lived to see it. Others traced their fingers along the stone heart, whispering her name. The castle, silent for 50 years, finally heard footsteps again, and for the first time since 1904, it felt alive. Heart Island was no longer a symbol of grief. It had become a testament to something stronger, that even broken dreams can rise again when people choose to remember. When the doors reopened and the first visitors stepped onto Heart Island, the castle inhaled for the first time in nearly a century. But a building does not regain its soul through stone alone. It comes back to life through the people who walk its halls, and through the stories they carry with them. As restoration continued through the 1960s and 70s, something unexpected began to happen. The castle didn't just attract tourists, it attracted pilgrims. People didn't come for architecture, they came for meaning. They came to see what love had built, and what grief had abandoned, and what memory was now trying to restore. The first summer after the island reopened, thousands stepped off the ferry and walked the same paths that George and Louise once wandered. Together, visitors paused on the balconies overlooking the St. Lawrence River, imagining the couple watching sunsets there. Others placed their hands on you, finished walls, and whispered things as if the stone could hear them. Guides soon noticed a pattern. Couples lingered longer. Widows cried quietly. Children asked why someone would build a castle for love, and adults struggled to answer. Heart Island had become more than a tourist attraction. It had become a mirror, a place that reflected whatever people carried in their own hearts. Some visitors came for closure, some came for wonder, some came because they, too, had lost someone. One elderly woman, her hair white, her steps slow, stood for an hour at the base of the main tower. When a guide approached to see if she needed help, she shook her head and said, "I just want to feel what he felt, to love someone so much that you'd build a world for them." Another man brought a small bouquet of lilies, placed them on the marble floor of the unfinished ballroom, and whispered, "For my wife. She never got to see Paris. This will do." The castle's story began to spread, not through marketing, but through word of mouth. People told their friends, "You have to go there. You have to see it. It's here." Tree carved into stone, poets wrote about it. Photographers traveled from across the world to capture its quiet majesty. Newlyweds posed on the grand staircase, as if claiming a blessing from the past. Even skeptics, people who didn't believe in romance, found themselves pausing before the carved heart hidden in the wall, feeling something they didn't know how to describe. And slowly, subtly, the castle changed. Not physically, its towers still bore scars of time, its ceilings still carried cracks, and many rooms remained unfinished. But emotionally, it had become warm again. Life returned to the halls. Rough footsteps, laughter, whispers, and the rustling of brochures in excited hands. The silence that once felt heavy now felt peaceful. The wind through the windows no longer sounded like grief, it sounded like breath. By the 1980s, Heart Island had become one of the crown jewels of the Thousand Islands region. The Bridge Authority continued restoring rooms year after year, repairing staircases, repainting ceilings, retiling floors, always careful not to erase the past, only to preserve it. Visitors appreciated that. They didn't want a perfect castle. They wanted the truth. They wanted to see where work had stopped on the day Louise died. They wanted to touch the stones George never saw finished. They wanted to feel the weight of what was lost and the beauty of what remained. Then came the tradition that no one could have predicted: weddings. Heart Island became one of the most popular wedding destinations in the region. Couples stood beneath the arched pergola, overlooking the river, promising to do what George never got to do: grow old together. Some said it was ironic. Others said it was poetic. But every ceremony, every vow, every kiss breathed new life into the ruins. It was as if the castle once abandoned in despair was being slowly healed by the love of others. Even the staff felt it. One longtime groundskeeper said during an interview, "On days when the sun hits the stained glass just right, the whole castle glows. It feels like she's smiling again. Like the island remembers." And maybe it did. Maybe stones can remember. Maybe places hold emotions longer than the people who built them, because the more visitors came, the stronger the island felt. As if each person carried a spark of the life George and Louise never got to finish, as if each year, the castle was slowly reclaiming its heartbeat. Heart Island was no longer a grave for a dream. It had become a sanctuary for hope, a monument not only to a tragic love story, but to the idea that love, in all its flawed, fragile, unfinished forms, is still worth building for. As the decades passed, Boldt Castle didn't just welcome visitors. It absorbed them. It collected their footsteps, their hopes, their heart breaks, like a quiet archivist of human emotion. Every season brought new faces. Every face carried a story. And somehow, in ways no one could explain, those stories stayed. Some visitors swore they felt a shift in the air the moment they stepped into the grand hall. Others said the castle seemed to listen when they spoke softly, as if its walls still remembered how to hold secrets. And maybe they did. One summer afternoon, a young couple arrived on the island holding hands, but speaking very little. They moved slowly through the rooms, pausing in doorways as if looking for something they had lost. Finally, in the library, the woman whispered, "This is where he would have read to her. This is where she would have sat." Tears rolled down her face. Her fiancé explained quietly to a nearby staff member that they had recently survived a terrible accident. She wasn't supposed to walk again, but here she was, climbing the steps of a castle built for love. When they reached the balcony overlooking the river, he knelt and proposed, not because the moment was perfect, but because the place itself felt like a witness, a reminder that love can survive what life tries to break. Another time, an elderly man arrived alone. He moved with a cane, yet he insisted on climbing every staircase, every tower, even the steep stone steps leading to the powerhouse at the top, overlooking the river. He could barely see through failing eyes. He whispered, "We came here together once. She wanted to come again before she passed, so I came for her." He stayed on the island until the last ferry. Before leaving, he slipped a folded letter into a crack in the stone wall. When staff found it days later, it contained only 5 words. "For Louise, for all of us, there were lighter stories." 2. Schoolchildren came and raced along the walkways, their laughter echoing through rooms that hadn't heard joy in decades. Artists set up cells beneath the pergola, painting the castle in watercolor shades of gold and blue. Newlyweds danced on the grass at sunset, their shadows long and warm, as if completing a dance George and Louise never got to finish. And tourists, ordinary people from all walks of life, left with something they didn't arrive with, a sense of connection to history, to tragedy, to hope, because Boldt Castle had become more than a structure. It was a vessel, holding the stories of the heartbroken, the hopeful, the curious, the lost, the in love, the grieving, and the healing every day. The castle changed just a little, not in stone, but in spirit. On foggy mornings, it felt solemn, like a cathedral remembering its past. On bright afternoons, it felt alive, as sunlight filled the rooms with the warmth of beginnings. Some evenings, when the tide was low and the wind was soft, the whole island seemed to hum with a gentle nostalgia, as though it knew it had become a second home to the emotions people didn't know where else to put. A guide once said, "Some castles hold kings, this one holds people." And he was right. Heart Island became a Sanctuary for anyone who believed love mattered, even if it was unfinished, even if it was flawed, even if it was lost. Because here, in the quiet corridors of a dream frozen in time, people found themselves reflected in the story of George and Louise. They found grief, they found devotion, and most of all, they found proof that love leaves marks deeper than stone. As visitor numbers grew, something strange and unexpectedly beautiful began happening on Hart Island. People didn't just come to see the castle. They came to leave pieces of themselves behind. It started small. A couple slipped a folded note into a crack in the stone near the grand staircase. Then another visitor left a flower on the windowsill of the ballroom. A child placed a seashell at the foot of the tower. "So the island won't feel lonely," she said. Soon, the staff began to notice patterns. Letters tucked beneath loose tiles, poems wedged into old brickwork. Drawings slipped between floorboards, names carved softly, not destructively, into the wooden beams of unfinished rooms. What were these? Offerings? Prayers? Confessions? No, they were answers. Answers to the question the castle had asked every visitor when they first stepped inside. What do you carry in your heart? Some letters were brief, almost whispers on paper. I miss you. Thank you for loving me. I'm trying. I hope you're proud. Others were long pages of stories poured out by hands that trembled as if letting go of something heavy. One note read, "We lost our son this year. We didn't know how to keep going. But today, walking through these unfinished rooms, we remembered that love unfinished is still love." Another said, "I survived. I didn't think I would. This lace helped me breathe again." And then there were the letters to Louise, dozens of them. People wrote to her like she was a guardian of the island, a quiet angel watching over all who arrived with broken hearts. "Louise, I hope you see how many lives your story still touches. Louise, he loved you more than kingdoms. Louise, thank you for giving the world this place." Some letters were not addressed to anyone at all, just words released into a room that always listened. The staff, moved by the growing ritual, created a small wooden box near the entrance labeled "Letters for the Castle." By midsummer, the box overflowed. They emptied it into an archive, preserving each message, even those written on napkins, receipts, or torn brochures. These were not ordinary notes. They were emotional fingerprints, proof that the castle did what it was always meant to do, hold hearts. And then something even more unexpected happened. Weddings on Hart Island began adopting a new tradition. Before exchanging vows, couples would each place a letter into the cracks of the stone walls, promises they didn't want spoken aloud, but wanted the castle to keep. Some pledged loyalty, some pledged forgiveness. Some pledged to cherish the ordinary days Louise never got to have. And as more letters were placed, the atmosphere changed again. The castle felt full, not heavy, not sorrowful, full of whispers, full of prayers, full of hopes entrusted to a building that had once embodied only loss. Hart Island became not just a tourist site, but a living archive of who man longing. One historian wrote, "Boldt Castle was built for one love story. Now it protects thousands." Tour guides now tell visitors that every stone holds a secret, every wall carries a memory, and every room has been touched not just by time, but by the people who needed this place to feel whole again. In that way, Hart Island became what George Boldt never expected. Sanctuary of shared humanity, the very thing Louise always believed beauty was meant for. The castle was no longer a monument to tragedy. It had become a keeper of love, fragile, unfinished, hopeful, and utterly real. Today, when you stand on Hart Island at sunset, with the river turning gold beneath the sky, you can feel it, the quiet pulse of a doctor, that refused to die. Boldt Castle was never finished for the woman it was built for, But somehow, through decades of silence and storms, it found a different purpose. It became a home for all the unfinished loves, all the whispered prayers, all the aching hearts that needed a place to rest. And maybe that is why the castle still stands. Not as a monument to loss, but as proof that love, painful, imperfect, incomplete, can outlive the people who carried it. In our next chapter, we'll uncover the hidden stories, secrets, and legends that still linger inside these walls. Stories the island has never fully revealed. If you want to keep traveling with me through these forgotten places and lost histories, remember to like, subscribe, and stay with the story, because some dreams never end. They simply wait for someone to return to them.